the Evolution Security Podcast. Welcome, everybody. This is the Evolution Security Podcast. I am one half of the Tactical Twins. Unfortunately, my best friend, my twin brother, Eric, is not with us tonight. He could not make it, but I'm going to do my best to put together a great show, a fun show with someone who has become a good friend, and his name is Kirk Clark. How you doing, Kirk?
I'm good, man. How you doing today?
Doing good. Just ready for some fun conversation as we talked about for just a little bit. Now, I'll set out here at the very beginning that we don't have a lot of shooting focused shows, but it's fun to every now and then. And I was texting you. I was about to teach a class a couple weeks ago, and I had some questions about your take on a couple of things, and we got to talking back and forth, and we both said, we should talk about this stuff on the show. Let's have a show about these topics, the nuances of getting better as a pistol shooter. And again, talking to you, I just couldn't think of a better person to bring on than you, Kirk. Now, to introduce Kirk Clark to everybody in the audience. Now, if you're a listener to this show, you probably know who he is. But if you are, there is a group of an estimate of about 10,000 people in the United States. I'm kind of hoping that has grown since Mr. Tom Givens has given that roundabout figure. But let's just say there's several thousand people in the United States that basically go to all the open enrollment courses that are offered throughout the United States. And if you become a part of that society, that tribe of people, like-minded people that are wanting to learn, you end up meeting a lot of the same people. And at these classes, if you've been to any of them, you've probably been at a class with Kirk. And if it was a shooting class, he probably outshot everybody in the class. And to quote Tom Givens, Kirk's going straight to hell because he had to have sold his soul to the devil. So I'll never forget that. But yeah, Kirk is a great guy. I got to take a course with him about 10 years ago. He was my shooting partner and a very encouraging shooting partner when I was not at my best at that point. And so again, glad to have you here, Kirk. And I think we're going to have a lot of fun, and our listeners are going to learn a lot from this episode.
Thank you, Aaron. I think we're going to have a great time.
Well, let me start out by asking, what has your last year been like when it comes to training in all things in this lifestyle?
So I had reconstructive ankle surgery in January of 2023. That put me out from really doing much of anything for a good while. I was on a non-weight-bearing cast for 6 weeks, and then I was in a boot for, like two months after that, maybe, and on limited mobility kind of, since then. And so I really didn't do much shooting. I didn't do much martial arts. I, tried to diet to the best of my ability and, go to the gym a little bit. And that was really it from January of 23 until, this is June, May, really April, May of this year, right? And so, life happens. You come across these kind of gaps. But for me, this was a long one, where I really wasn't doing any martial arts or shooting or much of anything. And what got me training again was I really hadn't planned to go to Rogers Shooting School at all this year. And I'm sure we'll talk about Rogers more as the conversation goes on. But within 24 hours of each other. I had my usual group of guys I go to Rogers with. I've got a group of guys I've been going with since, their first time was 2013. My first time was 2015. So we've been going every other year for a long time. And they called me and said, "Hey, we're going in May. You coming?" And I said, "Oh, I can't say no to the boys. We'll go. All right." And within 24 hours, Mirko Mugli and Rick Remington reach out to me and go, "Hey, we're going in November to Rogers. Are you coming with us?" And I was like, well, how do you say no to Mirko and Rick? I mean, that's a great crew. And there's a lot of other really cool people going to be there. Ned Evans, Bruce Gray, Alex Sansone, my good friend. And it's going to be a really, really cool crew. So I went from really no shooting plans for 2024 to, all right, I'm going to Rogers twice this year. Like, okay, that's a lot. And so that's good. It got me off the couch, got me to start shooting a couple matches, doing my dry fire again, getting serious about it, and that's been great.
Excellent. Now, I'll be honest. I've heard some discussions about the Rogers Shooting School, and I've heard some from you even, but it is a place that is definitely revered. And I know that there is a specific run or almost like a test that you take, but I'm just excuse me, kind of pulling that from my memory. Can you give the listeners some background on what the Rogers Shooting School is and what people could expect going and the benefits, because I know they're myriad.
So I've like you said in the introduction, I've taken a lot of classes with a lot of people. I did, I'm working on my second master's degree right now. I did the math. I've got like double the classroom hours in shooting and, this lifestyle that I do and, academic stuff, which is kind of funny. And I've repeated several classes, over the years. Gabe White's class, I repeated Tests and Standards when John Johnson was teaching it. I've repeated ECQC I think 5-6 times. And there's some classes that are worth redoing. This last trip in May to Rogers was my 7th trip to Rogers in a decade, and I'm going again later this year. So awesome. That's like the one sentence what I think about Rogers, right? There's several reasons for that. The Rogers Shooting School is one of the oldest fixed facility schools in the United States. I want to say it started in the late 70s, early 80s, that kind of time frame. So after API, which would become Gunsight. But it is one of the oldest fixed facility schools. And Bill Rogers, the gentleman that runs it, he is one of the most, I think, under-recognized figures in our community because the man's a brilliant inventor. He's the first guy to ever do a thermoplastic holster. So thermoplastic holsters are due to Bill Rogers. He did that, right? Modern retention security holsters, like what we now associate as the SLS, ALS, and that kind of family of holsters from Safariland. Originally, Rogers Holster Company got bought out by Safariland. They bought his designs. Modern top shelf retention holsters, that's Bill. Bill came up with those. And he also came up with the Rogers shooting system, which is the target system used, the Rogers Shooting School, which are originally pneumatic targets. Now they're electronic. There's electronic versions where basically 8-inch head plates pop up at a distance. The closest target is 8 yards and the furthest target is 22 yards. So there's 7 targets that kind of pop up. They don't stay up permanently like a head plate rack. They pop up for a certain amount of time, then they disappear. At the 8-yard line, the 8-inch head plate will pop up on a two-handed, test, will pop up for half a second, and then it's down. And you have half a second from whatever else you're doing. You see the head plate pop up. I know I see T1. I gotta stop what I'm doing and go get it because it's not going to be there very long. So he invented that. He invented a lot of other gadgets and gizmos throughout the years. But probably one of his biggest legacies is the Rogers Shooting School, where he, basically uses his target system to set up some scenarios. And he was one of the founding people and early board members in USPSA. He was, he's been a fencing champion, a skeet shooting champion, a USPSA champion. The guy's just done a lot of stuff, and was an FBI agent briefly, and then kind of pursued his calling in this world, in the shooting and, I guess, support gear technology world, but also the training world, the Rogers Shooting School. And my understanding is in the 90s into the 2000s, basically a lot of special forces groups, their pistol program would be, we're going to just send you to Rogers for a week. You've done basic familiarization. Rogers is kind of your finishing school. And so it's very well known in that community. But in the larger, like the 10,000 people, like you mentioned, it's not as well known because he doesn't advertise. Like there's no ad budget. He doesn't, he keeps pretty low profile. But amongst people who've been in this for a long time, Bill and his school are very well known.
Now, but what would someone going there expect? Are there multiple courses, or is it there's just different classes that are offered, or is it one major, week-long course or something like that?
They just started offering a third course, right? Their two courses are the intermediate advanced class, which is kind of the standard Rogers shooting class. Like when people talk about Rogers, that's what they're talking about 99% of the time. That was the program that was used by a lot of, like special forces guys back in the day, and a lot of law enforcement, other people over the years. They also have the basic class where you shoot a lot of 22. It's also like 5-day class, but it's like a more introductory level course. And from talking to Bill, it originated as like a lot of the SEALs who were coming through there doing the regular school. They wanted their wives to learn how to shoot kind of like this, in this defensive way. And so it started off as like a wives program where we're going to start with 22s and then graduate to 9mm. And it just kind of grew from there and became its own kind of like coursework. They're also working on what they've done, I think, a couple iterations now of a new class called Advanced Operators. I think you have to like have done the regular class to do it, but they're only doing it like once, twice a year, and that's more a mix of carbine and like centerfire carbine 223 and centerfire pistol. They also have blocks where you do intermediate advanced. And then when you're done for the day around 4 or 5 o'clock, they'll do like a 2 to 3 hour session afterwards on either shotgun or carbine. In this case, they're shooting 9mm carbines because the ranges only go out to 22 yards, right? And my understanding is that the carbine course was developed by Claude Werner, who I'm sure fans of this show know. Mm-hmm. Claude was also the former head instructor there for many years. So
who usually teaches the courses? Is it Bill Rogers, or they have different instruction staff?
They have, of course, Bill's always there. Bill's getting older. Bill's in his mid-70s now. He's starting to slow down a little bit, but the man is smart as a whip. I really hope to be a third as put together as he is at his age, because the man is very intelligent, very good shooter. I've seen him in his mid-70s go up, shoot the Rogers test cold, because that's one of the things he usually does, is he'll shoot the test, the long form test, which is 9 events. And then when you do it during the week, you will get 6 opportunities at the test, right? But he'll do it for you first, where you just see him run it. And I've seen him shoot in the high 120s, like every time he's done it. Each time with like a different gun, like, I'm shooting a Glock, I'm shooting an MP, I'm shooting a Beretta, whatever, and in his mid-70s shooting, in the 120s at the Rogers Shooting School is, I know he made the test, but still, that's absurd. The man's very good.
Awesome.
And so he teaches, and then you also have like a long-standing crew of guys, mix of local law enforcement guys, but also several former SEAL Team 6 guys out there. So you get a good mix of law enforcement and special forces, plus also his grandson is also now working there. So you have civilian in the house too. So you have a good mix of people. They're very up to date with the times. You go out there, they're mostly shooting SIG 320s with optics on them. You know what I mean? They're not like stuck in the past. They're looking at what the students are bringing, and they're all good shooters too. Like you see the instructors shoot a lot in that class, and not a lot, but like what I think is an appropriate amount. And they're all solid. Like they're all people worth listening to and taking advice from.
Awesome. Now, whereabout is it located?
It's in LJ, Georgia, which is about an hour north of Atlanta, and beautiful little mountain town. Town's gotten bigger in the decade I've been going there. You can tell some of the Atlanta monies, doing vacation homes out there and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But they have an apple festival in the fall, so if you're going to pick a time to go, that's a great time to do it because the town's actually pretty fun then. And bring a car with 4-wheel drive probably, because you're in the mountains. But it's a really beautiful little town. Actually, it's a great place to school.
It sounds like some place that Eric and I are going to have to hit together.
Call me when you do. I'll go.
Oh, rock and roll. Definitely. That'd be a blast. Well, so this kind of brings me to part of why I wanted to talk to you specifically. Let me premise it like this, that I started getting back serious. Well, I was never super serious about shooting, but I was more serious than the average gun owner. But I cannot, for about 8 or so years, I just shot about every 2 months, that kind of deal. Still carried a pistol all the time, but just wasn't serious about shooting. Then about a decade ago, I for some reason just got the bug to get back into training and getting more serious about shooting, learning, and dry fire, taking courses and all that stuff. But even so, 10 years ago, I started learning from some specific, well-known instructors, getting their videos, watching their commentary, all this stuff. But I've also noticed what I feel like in just the last 2 years or so, I feel like some of those people that really seem to have it all together don't really anymore. Now, let me put it this way. It seems like to me that due to the, rapid, exchange of information, almost like a refinement between all these world-class shooters that people have finally really keyed into, that almost like, the pressure testing that goes on in combatives, like under the great instructors like Craig Douglas, Cliff Byerly, and Kelly McCann, that they discover almost congruently what works. When you go to one of those guys' classes, it's going to be darn similar. They're going to have different takes on things, but boy, they're going to agree on more than they disagree on. Am I on the wrong track on that? Am I missing something? Or has shooting kind of, we're talking about practical pistol shooting, in other words, self-defense shooting, competition that focuses on things that would be in self-defense shooting skills. Do you think that's kind of refined in the recent past?
I think the basics in any well-developed like discipline are usually going to be pretty similar from like place to place, right? You go to jujitsu and triangles all kind of look like triangles, like whatever gym you're in, right? Like you go to wrestling, like a shot's going to look like a shot basically everywhere. It's not like, well, here we do it a little different. It's kind of like it's well executed or not. Now, once you get into esoterica, like the cutting edge stuff, the edge case stuff, you'll have, I think, more diversity of opinion with people in the developed field. But like when I came up, I'm 38. I've been shooting, semi-seriously since like the year 2000. So it's been 24 years. And when I came up, you still had a lot of people out there talking about like point shooting, and you had, Weaver versus isosceles was still a discussion. And, you had a lot of, the caliber wars were raging. I was a pure, like they all fall to hardball. What do you need a plastic gun for? I believed all that stupid stuff back then, because that was in the culture and that was what was out there. And so I think the overall like level of knowledge is definitely higher. Like, and I'll tell you, I took a relative of mine, young kid, out shooting a few months back, and never shot with him before. He just knew I was, into this pretty seriously, and his mom wanted to, have him shoot with me. And so I started talking about the four rules of gun safety. He's like, "Oh, I already know those." I'm like, "What are they?" And he recites them for me. And I'm like, "Where did you learn that?" He's like, "Oh yeah, this guy I watch on YouTube." And I'm just like, "Man, this like 17-year-old kid knows the four rules of gun safety from YouTube. Like
Awesome.
this is pretty cool." And don't get me wrong, there's all sorts of dirt that comes out of YouTube and Instagram, and that battle is never ending. But there's a lot of good that comes out of there too. And so I do agree, like broadly speaking, like you go to a pistol class today, and the average person showing up to like an enthusiast pistol class, like the 10,000, if you show up to a class populated by those people, dude, the clue level is so much higher than it was when I started, 24 years ago. Like it's just so many things are just known now that just weren't. Like the advanced practitioners, is there a huge difference? In tactics, techniques, equipment, sure, but like the guys back then were solid too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but amongst like the populace, the people showing up to those classes, like there was a while there where I go shooting class and I would just do real good, and now I show up shooting classes and like there's people there. And I'm like, oh, I'm gonna have to really work. Like I'm having to like really bring my absolute A game. If I'm trying to win a Pokemon or a bauble or a prize or something. And I do think that's because one, we've come to a state where there's a lot of agreement on the core fundamentals. You have some yahoos on everything, but yahoos are yahoos. That's a way to brand yourself in the market as, oh, I don't do what everyone else does, I've got my own brand of whatever. And that's almost always foolishness, but occasionally you do have people out in the desert doing cool stuff. So don't just dismiss people because they're unusual, but you know caveat emptor. And I do think that there's a lot of solidification on the core stuff. Like we all kind of agree on, Jeff Cooper is really responsible for a lot of that. We all put two hands on our guns. We all use flash sight pictures. We all use, modern semi-automatics. There's a lot of things that are just, we all are on the same page on that, 50 years ago, we certainly weren't. And 20 years ago, I think we're even more on the same page than we were. And we're in an exciting time. There's a lot of recent innovations. I think the modern appendix carry holster has done a lot for a lot of people. I was not an early adopter. I was kind of a third wave adopter in appendix carry I started carrying that way in 2011. I first saw it in 2011. Paul Gomez showed it to me, and I was like, well, that's really interesting. And I took a class with Todd Green, and he showed it to me, and I was like, well, that's really interesting. So the combatives guys and the performance guys, for performance from concealed carry guys, all agree that this is the thing. Okay, let's do it. And I know it's much older than that. You go back to the
Yeah.
old manuals and stuff, 20s, 30s, it's been there. But like guys carrying a service size pistol every day under a t-shirt that way, that is new. And especially
Yeah.
the number of people doing it and the quality of the equipment is radically better. I've played around with some of those old appendix holsters, and like you're not doing sub 2 second build drills in those. So I do think, yes, it's a continuation of an older tradition, but it's a meaningful evolution, like enabled by technology, enabled by concealed carry concepts, Shaggy, and the other early holsters that kind of were figuring how to make this stuff really work out. You also have the addition of slide mounted optics, and that's old too. I remember shooting a doctor's sight that you would put on the dovetail of the rear sight of a pistol. On a Colt Combat Commander in like 2003 or something. So that's older than people think too, but they didn't work very well back then. You basically had like Kelly McCann out there. He was the one crazy guy in the desert doing that, and
Mm-hmm.
the rest of us caught up later once the RMR came out, and we finally had a durable optic that could handle the stresses of putting 20,000 rounds through one.
Well, something that comes to my mind is, and we can delve into this further in how we're going to present the rest of the show. To me, trigger press. There is a lot of nuance in trigger press. And I preface this too, and you can tell me if you disagree, but at least for the normal shooter, I'm talking about someone that can't go to all these classes, but is serious enough to go shoot once a month, take a class once a year or whatever. The most bang for buck for improving accuracy is a solid grip. And and what we used to know as, trigger press was king, right? Trigger press was king. But just bear with me here, but with a proper grip, let's just call it a proper grip for lack of a better way to describe it, can negate a lot of trigger error.
100%.
But now, once we've got this solid grip and we need to dial in things further, then we start talking about the nuance and the way in which we press the trigger. Would you? Because it seems to me there's still quite a bit of difference in how people talk about the trigger press. Do you want to talk about that in our right now, or we can talk about it in our list here?
No, this is great. So trigger press is something I like. My trigger press. So let me preface it. Like, you're completely right. If I have like 1 hour to teach someone how to shoot, like, hey, you're going to get in a gunfight next week, and you got 1 hour with Kirk Clark to help you like prep for that. That's all I get with you. Well, you're going to learn the rules of gun safety. You're going to learn a lot about draw, and you're going to learn a lot about grip. And we're just mostly going to be talking about putting, like the back plate of your Glock between you and what you're trying to hit. Like, I'm not going to really worry much about sighting or trigger press or any of that, because you're right. Grip will mask almost all shooting errors, really. Because the reason people are missing, for the most part, I don't really think is trigger pressing or sighting issues. Sighting issues are pretty easy to dial in. It's you just got to figure out what's going on with someone's eyes, because everybody's eyes are different, right? I'm really not a big believer in like absolutism, and very much. There's a few things I'm pretty absolutist on, but for the most part, you got to figure out, okay, what is this pair of hands, this set of eyes, and this brain? How do we get good performance out of that aggregation, right?
Yeah.
And that'll be different for everybody. But if I got an hour, we're going to talk about grip, because it's the easiest way to get you shooting pretty good fast. Now, as you want to graduate towards like mastery, and also taking a step back, you're talking about the guy that shoots, does class once a year, shoots once a month. That guy is my guy. That guy is awesome. And, I think in the training, in the 10,000, we tend to denigrate that guy. No, that guy is so far ahead of the curve that it's crazy. Because, you go through like Claude Werner's stuff and, NRA magazine and all that. And there's just so many people with very little training that do very well. Now, we don't want to rely on that, but if you're going to that level of effort, you are doing a great service to yourself and, general public, and good for you.
Amen.
Now, if you want to walk the path of like mastery, if you get to where this is like a big part of your, intellectual life, or, the things you value and the way you want to spend your time and your money, that's a decision I made a long time ago. If you want to go towards mastery and get past that kind of like, hey, I'm fundamentally solid, but I want to do more than that, right? Yeah, now trigger press becomes important, right? Because we're not worried, we're not trying to mask issues so much as resolve them. And I really think usually when people miss, in my experience, and usually almost always when I miss, it's almost never from a sighting error. It's almost never from I pulled the trigger wrong error. Now, pulling the trigger wrong can slow me down, can make me shoot less efficiently than I should be. But I find when I miss, it's almost always that I like either, like what we call milking, or, like jerking. A lot of people think is you pulling the trigger too hard is actually you going, gun's about to go off. And you kind of put it down and left. Man, when I miss, it's almost always that. It's almost always, I take a shot, and then like for, one of the ways that, Bill Rogers explains it is you've got this caveman brain, right? It's got, hundreds of thousands of years of evolution in it. And at what point in our evolutionary history did you have explosions going off in your hands, like a couple feet in front of your face? It's not a thing humans have like done, right?
Yeah.
This is a 500-year-old technology, and in evolutionary terms, that's nothing. And we don't do it enough to adapt to it, right? And so you're in this unusual situation where your brain does not like the pressure. And I think the pressure is actually much more important than the recoil impulse. And maybe for smaller people or more higher recoiling weapons, that could be different. But it's the blast that I think really sends some part of our, our lower brain going, do something about it, which is either push into it. So I'm about to shoot now, or it's like, oh, I'm about to shoot. Oh, let me just kind of let go of this. And then, so it's sighted in, but then we disrupt the sight picture by the time we have fully pressed the trigger, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for me, trigger press, we're trying to get around exactly that. One, I'm trying to do two things, be fast and accurate. This is where I think a lot of people that don't like, let's say, competitive shooting, performance shooting, this is where I think a lot of those people may be missing the boat. I don't want to be fast or accurate. I want to be fast and accurate. And to me, good shooting is both. Like, I don't care how accurate you are. If you got like half a magazine put into you by the other guy by the time you break your first shot, that's a bad plan. And I don't care how fast you are. If you get half a magazine put into you while you're just like dumping rounds downrange and not providing like effective fire, you have to do both, because every gunfight, every whatever, that's a timed event. Right? There's a part time, and that part time is you getting shot in the face. The problem is we don't know what the part time for our event is going to be, right? And so that's why I want to be as fast as I can be and as accurate as I can be, because likely is my skill level enough to like do fine there. Yeah, sure. But why wouldn't I want more? If I find this enjoyable, which I do. So once you get into trigger press, we're trying to accomplish two things. We want to be fast and accurate. So to be fast, I have to have that trigger completely set up to fire as soon as my sights tell me it's time to fire, right? Because I want my sights, my vision, to be driving when I press the trigger, right? What I don't want is, okay, my sights are perfectly lined up, and I'm still resetting or I'm doing something with the trigger and it's not ready. And now I have this dead time where I'm not shooting and I should be shooting. So that's basically I'm trying to reset, when the gun fires, does the gun magic, slide goes back, the trigger goes dead. I'm trying to bring my trigger all the way forward. And me personally, I bring it to where it's like, I stop feeling the trigger moving forward. I feel it resetting. I feel that reset stop. Okay, it's time to come back. And if my finger comes off the trigger a little bit, that's fine. If it doesn't, that's fine too. I'm not trying to like ride the link or whatever, where I'm just trying to catch it at exactly that point. I don't really believe in that very much. Maybe with like 2011s with 2-pound triggers, you can do that. But I think anything else, you're going to struggle. So I want to have all that work done so that by the time the slide's back, I'm ready to shoot again, right? If I could achieve that, that would be ideal. I'm trying to get all that resetting stuff done in recoil. So as my sights settle, I'm already brought the trigger back to the wall, right, where I'm now ready. And once I see the sight picture I want, I'm just going to push through the wall. The second thing I'm trying not to do, so that's the speed element. The accuracy element is I'm trying to pull that trigger straight back while not disrupting like the pistol, like the aim. I've gone to this trouble pointing it where I want it to be. It's sighted where I want it. And now I need to press the trigger in a way that disrupts that sight picture like to an absolutely minimal amount. And there are ways to do that. For me, I really think the first piece is almost more important. I think a lot of that accuracy piece is going to be based on your hands. Like, okay, what part of the trigger finger do I use? Well, show me your hands and show me your gun, because I use a different part of my trigger finger for 1911 than I do a revolver. I'm sure it's the same for a lot of people. And it goes back to that. Well, who's shooting? But trigger press, getting that right, getting it to where all that like work is done, and now I can shoot at the speed of vision. Like, my goal is I want to be able to shoot at what Bill Rogers calls a human reaction time. I want to be able to have my shooting limited only by my physiology. right? And it's not that I need to be, mag dumping, at 0.15 splits at someone in a parking lot. That's not what I'm talking about. But I want to be making my decisions based off the tactical situation in front of me. I don't want to not have decisions available to me because I don't have the technical skill to make those possible, right?
Well, so then let's take it back then, and let's put together a list of priorities or concepts that a shooter that wants to step up and get to the next level and get to the next stage or chapter in their training with a pistol, practically and defensively. What are some items that are palpable that we can communicate as listeners should focus on, and how to focus on those, and even how to practice those things?
100%. I know he's a controversial figure, but I mean, really, if you're trying to improve your shooting, I don't think you can do much like for a one-time purchase and then actually using it. It being your doorstop won't help. But Ben Steger's Dry Fire Reloaded book, that
Yep.
is, man, that book and like his teaching in general has done more than probably anyone to increase the level of skill of like what a USPSA GM means. Like a USPSA GM today and a USPSA GM 30 years ago, like it's, you look at because this is all objective, like the time standards, we know what the time standards were back then. The skill jump in the last like 10, 15 years has been ridiculous. And I think Ben's pushed a lot of that because he's come up, again, you're talking about like, we've kind of figured some things out. Ben was one of the guys that figured some things out, and he's produced a lot of books and like educational materials. And that book is really, really, really good. Other supplementary dry fire materials, I really like Steve Anderson's book and also Annette Evans' book. I would check out both of those also. I think Annette's book is great because it's just what you need to know, right? Like, and you can read it and reuse it, right? Whereas Ben's is much more, it's a textbook. There's like a time to, like, okay, we're going to do this page to this page, right? You can do that with the nets also, but I think it's also easier just to kind of like read through it like a book and then reuse it. So that's another resource I'd recommend. But really, dry fire to me is where you get good at shooting. Live fire is there. There are some things that can only be practiced in live fire. And so when I do live fire, I'm really spending most of my time on those things. I don't spend a lot of time working the skills I can do in dry fire. I spend time testing those skills. I'm like, all right, where am I at now that I'm actually shooting? Because it's easy to lie to yourself in dry fire. It's easy to dry fire wrong, right? And so I think a foundation and a plan for dry fire, that's really the biggest thing. And, the great thing is it's free. It, cost of a book or two, and that's it. That said, it can be done wrong. And so it's really important not to do that. And this is why I would really and this is what I do tell kind of beginning people who want to get that next level. This is why I tell them is like, one, you have to be ruthless in your like safety regimen with dry fire. Like go to a room with no live ammo in it, don't have your carry gun on, none of that stuff, double, triple check. When you are done dry firing, set the dry fire gun down for like 10 minutes, put a timer on your phone. And then if you're going to reload it or do something with it or whatever. But there has to be a very distinct, this is dry fire time, this is dry fire space. We're now out of dry fire time and out of dry fire space, right? Now, if you want to do like less structured dry fire, I'm actually okay with that. But that's literally what SIRT pistols are for. Like get a SIRT pistol, a little laser pistol that cannot fire real ammo. Like I'll mess around with a SIRT pistol on my couch all the time. But I don't do that with like an unloaded gun or something because it's just, you're gonna make a mistake eventually. The other thing you want to get right about dry fire is dry fire should not be lackadaisical. I'd rather you do 10 minutes 5 days a week than 2 hours once a week. Like easily, I'd rather someone do that because when you're doing dry fire, your hands should be exhausted by the time you're done. Your hands should hurt. You should be a little sweaty. You should be wanting to do something else. And if you can do 2 hours of dry fire, you're either world-class guy trying to like grind that out, or you're not doing it right, frankly. So, and also most people's concentration, most people can concentrate on something seriously for about, like 30 to 40 minutes max. Most people, a lot of people are under that. So I don't believe in marathon sessions. I've done them, but like, I don't think that's the 80-20 thing. You're in the 20% where you're in that, like, oh, I'm doing this. It's helping me a little bit, but it's not something I'd recommend. When you're trying to get to that next level, we're worried about the 80% stuff, the stuff that gets us most of the way there.
Yeah.
So I think dry fire is the key. Live fire is much less important than people think it is. It's important. You need to do it. Like, you really kind of have to, but most of what you're doing, if you do it right, can be done in dry fire.
Well, it's amazing though. I think it's almost like when I know that I need to hit the jujitsu gym more than I do. It is so easy for me to tell students at the end of a class, do me a favor, if all you do is dry fire 5 minutes a week every Saturday, you're just gonna gain dividends from that. That's I would do more than that, but please at least do that. It's put it on your calendar every Saturday morning. You do 5 minutes, but I just wonder how many of my students actually even do that.
It depends. Interest levels vary, and I don't. One thing I really don't do is I'm not a big believer in like proselytizing. Like, I don't really like, if someone asks me like, "Hey, what do you think about something?" I'll tell them. In like a big picture sense, I'll give my perspectives. But if someone wants to do 5 minutes once a week, hey, that's 5 minutes once a week. That's great. They want to do less than that, as long as they're safe and they make good decisions. Really what gets people in trouble is those two things: are unsafe gun handling practices and making poor decisions. Claude
And
Warner.
how they're doing their dry fire.
Yeah, but also like if they get in a gunfight in a parking lot somewhere, right? So
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
it's both. It's both at home and if you have to actually use these skills, right? It's poor decision making and poor safety practices are what get people killed much more than marksmanship issues. And the great news is with those things, you can again handle a lot of that for free with like I really liked. Well, I got the opportunity to train with William April several times before he passed.
Mm-hmm.
William, great guy. Another guy went to Rogers like every year, and shot advanced from concealment. One of the very few people to do that.
Awesome.
And William, he has this idea of like making a parking space in your mind for different things, and I really think that's like wargaming is a thing to call it, but I don't even really. I just like making a parking space in your mind. Like, hey, if someone walked in right now with an AK and started shooting up the place, what would I do? And I just think about that, or I imagine it, or I just kind of walk myself through those scenarios. Like, all right, what if something went wrong? Because a lot of times, when you read about these negative outcomes where people get killed, or they just handle, or they shoot someone they shouldn't shoot, right? Which is just as much a problem. It's almost always because they're kind of making up on the fly, and it's going to be a very stressful situation for the vast majority of people. And you don't want, like, I got this from when I trained with Clint Smith in like 2005. I was at Thunder Ranch, and he was talking about like support hand only shooting. He's like, you don't want to figure out how to do this in your gunfight. You want to have like a solution, but I think it's much broader than a technical thing. I think it's like, okay, how do we handle situations? The great news is, again, that you can do for free. It's just interest level. So when I'm dealing with new people, basic people, it's really getting that squared away is what matters more than anything. Is how are you like? Because if you own a gun poorly, you can ruin your life. Right? It can get stolen. It could get used against you. You can have a negligent discharge. You go out there, shoot someone you shouldn't shoot. Like that. That's all. That's real life. That's realities, and we don't want to talk about it because we're gun people. But like that's all true if you do it wrong. Now, if you do it right, it can be a huge benefit to your life. It can introduce you to lots of fun people and give you lots of great life experiences and give you like genuine earned self-confidence and genuine earned not the feeling of safety, but the reality of safety to the extent to which that's a thing that exists.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's all available to you. The ability to have a useful tool that can save you or the people you care about's lives, that's a big thing. And a lot of us want that. So for me, do you need to be some like, like top flight shooter? No, that's something you want, right? And if you want it, yeah, talk to me. Let's go. But if you just want, like, I want just enough, um, you don't need to spend that much time on that part of it. That part of it's pretty doable. Like shooting once a month and doing class once a year, you're in a pretty good spot to be, pretty solid B class shooter if you take your dry fire seriously and your mindset stuff, and you actually carry a gun, and you actually carry a gun well, and you have kind of your potential scenarios war gamed out, and at the end of the day, it will come down to your wherewithal in that moment and your spirit of the bayonet and all that. But that's not anything I think anyone can really help you with. That's a you thing, right?
So you started out, and it's awesome, is one major concept being dry fire. And then you stated that someone needs to get, let me just put it like this, someone needs to be conscious of being a safe and intelligent gun owner. And I'm trying to kind of paraphrase what you said, because I like how you said it. That it was very simple in that, okay, as long as people are safe in how they handle their pistols when they are at home in dry fire, or if they're out on the range, they're safe. Therefore, they've got the physical safety aspect of owning a firearm and being a shooter. And then there's the concept of being a good gun carrier or a good citizen that will possibly use self-defense.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about safety in gun manipulation, and then safety in terms of making proper decisions in when you can use that force. So I like how this went, because dry fire really is where shooters get good. But you're really keying this into something that even someone like me that spends a lot of time thinking about this stuff, or else I wouldn't have a podcast. It's funny you bring that up, because I have a work colleague that lives in the country, and someone was driving up in her front yard, and she's in a rural area. There's a gate to her driveway, and someone can get into that gate if it's open, and then drive up, let's just say a quarter mile to their house. Well, so they see people coming in to their driveway, and her husband goes outside and fires a gun at the ground, scare them off.
Hopefully.
And I explained that, number one, you shouldn't have left the inside. First, I said, do you think it was a good idea to leave your house, go outside your house? And she kind of ho-hummed, and I said, I'll give you the answer. It's no.
There's an answer. And it wasn't that.
You should have stayed inside your house. And then the second thing is, your husband firing a gun into the ground. What that meant was that he was not in that instant truly in fear for his life or your life, or else he would have shot at the possible the attackers. I said, you live in Oklahoma, you live in a rural town, they probably won't bother you about that. But depending on what city you're in, that was going to get you bare minimum charges against you, and your bare minimum in that sense, you're going to be out a lot of money trying to defend yourself in using lethal force when you knew yourself that lethal force wasn't justified because you didn't use it as lethal force.
So like I'm a big believer in everyone should do some training on like, legal use of force concepts, of course tailored to your state and your jurisdiction, and consult defense attorney. But really get with Masad Ayub. That's who you really need to get with more than anyone. And I've done his 5-day instructor program, and it's fantastic. And all
An
that.
instructor course in the legal aspects.
Yeah,
Oh, that's awesome.
it was Moss's like full 5-day like instructor deal. It's just a little bit of everything, but it was really good. There's no range time; it was all classroom. It was
Awesome.
like in the middle of COVID, and it was kind of fun. And that is good to do and important. But I find like that's a lot of stuff to remember, right? And so I find I'm not that smart. I find what I like to do is say, all right, let's imagine I am illegally carrying a firearm in New York City. If I use it, I will go to not jail, but prison. Would I use that firearm right now? And if the answer is yes, well, yeah, man, there's things worth going to prison over. There's things worth, losing your life over, right? But if it doesn't meet that standard, if I'm not willing to die or go to prison over it, I should be very, very circumspect about bringing a firearm into the situation. Now, are there exceptions to that? Absolutely. If I'm a 6'2", 220-pound, jujitsu guy, and for me, the world looks different than if you're 70 years old and 5 feet tall, female, right? And so that's going to be different person to person. But I think a lot of people are looking for well, when can I shoot him? And it's just like, well, you're framing this all wrong. It's just like in jujitsu, and someone's like, well, when he has his hooks in and he has the RNC completely sunk, and how do I escape that? And it's like, well, you kind of don't. That's you get choked out. There's some like 1%er stuff you might be able to like figure out, but for the most part, you're taking a nap, right? If they're nice, if they're not, you're dying, right? And same thing. People are like, well, when can I shoot? And it's like, well, there's time you might have to shoot somebody, but let's try to the best of our ability to figure out other solutions. You remember the old show, Have the Gun, Will Travel? It's an old show from like the 50s or whatever.
Yes.
Rod Serling wrote a lot of the early ones. And I love that show. It's my favorite cowboy show because Paladin, the main character, he's a quick draw, amazing shooter. He can, do all the trick shots and everything, but he will exhaust all sorts of options to try to like, how do we smart our way through this? And then if it comes down to gunplay, well, he's going to win it. But that's kind of not plan number one. Now, at the same time, he doesn't hesitate unnecessarily. If there's a life or death thing, he's going to do what he needs to do right there. Man, I think Paladin's kind of like the example is like, how do I smart my way out of this? Like a situation I read about on Facebook the other day was a guy who was an off-duty security guard of some kind, and he's outside his kid's jiu-jitsu class, and he's waiting in his car for his kids to get out of jiu-jitsu, and he sees some young guys kind of like what he thinks are like casing a store that's next door to the jiu-jitsu place. So he gets out, pulls his gun on them, starts issuing commands. One of the kids drops an airsoft pistol from his waistband, and the guy starts issuing more commands to them, and one of them does a furtive action, reaches for something according to the guy, and so he ends up blasting this turns out to be a teenager like a bunch, right? And the teenager dies, and now he has a very complex situation because apparently it looks like I know nothing of the details, just what was on a news report, and the news is always wrong.
Yeah.
And so who knows? He could be completely justified and the facts could have been wrong. But assuming it's prima facie what's on the report, why are you issuing commands to people? These are people walking around, and you are not law enforcement. Like, this is not, and his reasoning was, well, what if there's an armed robbery and my kid gets involved? Well, go inside, get your kid, man. Like, get out of there. barricade in the jiu-jitsu gym, or like you have options, right? You have just go out there and look imposing or something. You have call 911. You have there's plays. Introducing a gun into a situation where you think something might be happening that is directed at a third party, you're now entering into nebulous territory where a lot of things can happen, right? We want to be really circumspect about when we introduce violence, particularly lethal violence, into situations as they're developing. Now, of course, there's a right time to do things, and that's usually you want to be the one to shoot first. I mean, right? And but I don't think that guy really had thought about this very much. I think it was, I see something bad happening. I have my instinct to protect my child. I am defender gunman, and I'm going to go out and do defender gunman stuff. I will tell them what to do, and then either defeat them in glorious manly combat, or they will whimper away and the police will walk them off or whatever. And it's just like, man, but that's like 2 ways they could have gone, but there's like 100 ways they could go, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have no like legal protection like a law enforcement officer would have. And so it's just one of those things, like, just be really, really intelligent and thoughtful and smart. Maybe have the gun under your leg in the car and you're kind of ready to go. Maybe you call your kid and say, hey, I want you to stay inside, don't come out, right? Like, there's options. I don't know, I'm not trying to second guess the man, I wasn't there. But there's so many cases where you just read people and really go to Claude Werner's I think it's called Unintended Outcomes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And go to read that. That is like, that will sell you on all this better than I can. And this is like me, the technical shooting guy, talking. The technical shooting stuff is, it's important, I think, but like, it's less important than this. This part of it is way more important for a new person. Now, if you want to talk about like technical skills that like a person needs, and this is a hill I will die on, you need to have your draws just squared away, especially your draw to like first hit, right? And I'm not talking about like the sub-second draw to an A zone thing, although I do think there's like a place for that, right? I think that's like a good goal, I don't think it's a necessity, but your ability to draw from concealment and accurately place around a grapefruit-sized target, and really we want to be doing this in less than a second and a half. That's really important. And I would say that's something to spend a lot of your dry fire time on. And not
And what distance would you say?
I mean, really, we want distance is visual, right?
Mm-hmm.
The visual component of shootings. All distance does at handgun ranges for the most part, because we're not doing like holdovers and stuff.
Yeah.
All it's doing is the target is now smaller relative to my sighting system, right? And that's less of an issue with red dots, because like a red dot is like usually like 2 MOA is what I like. Whereas you look at like most iron sights or something like 35 MOA or something is less, if I'm recalling correctly. So it's just a much less coarse aiming instrument. So especially with dot and stuff, shooting at distance is easier. And you just want that distance is now I'm at a smaller target. So it will take more time for me to confirm my sights as I press the trigger. I may want to press the trigger more slowly. And I may just want to really, really make sure that that sight image, that sight movie, as Gabe White says, is staying right where I want it to stay as I take that shot. Because, like if you're trying to shoot a B-27 at 3 yards, that's just a different problem than a B-8 at 25. That's a huge Andre the Giant guy or an 8-inch circle. Like, those are 2 different things. So for me, I really want people to be very proficient within, 10 yards would be great. You want to spend some time at 10 yards, because 10 yards is when shooting starts to get hard, right? Like inside of 10 yards, it's, really sighting is not really an issue. I once did the advanced super test from the Hardwire Tactical guys, and I once did that with a Glock 35 that had no sights on it, because I wanted to see if you could pass it, and you can absolutely. The super test. I did it from the holster. I don't know if I did the advanced super test times, but the super test, so the 3 test increments, so 5 yards, 10 yards, 15 yards, and then I did mine from the holster, is absolutely doable. At 15s where that gets really hard. So, but for sights, it's not that big of an issue up close. So I would say spend a lot of time at 7, spend a lot of time at 5, spend a lot of time at 10. know what your gun does at 25. You know, if you can keep it on a like a B8 repair center, like the paper of that at 25, that's a great place to start and start to get to where you can keep it inside the 8 ring and then start trying to shoot all black, right? But all that's secondary. I would say just spend a lot of time at like 10, 7, and 5. And you really want to be able to own that first shot, and that those times will be different, right? Like I really like the IDPA target as like a general use target, because it's I think the IDPA circle is either 8 or 10 inches maybe.
It's 8. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's 8 inches, so it's pretty good size. Same size as a head plate at Rogers Shooting School. So it's
Okay.
a pretty now been out of the Rogers School. It's a little. Some of them are half obscured, but like it's a good sized target to spend a lot of time on. IDPA targets are cheap. You just paste them as you shoot them. Like it's really easy. I've spent a lot of time on that. I like their scoring zone a lot better than the USPSA scoring zone. I think the USPSA scoring zone doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It goes too low. Like shooting someone in the belly button, you don't get a bonus point for that. And, so I really like the IDPA target. I spent a lot of time with that. I also really like the Langdon target with the two bullseyes, the two B8s on it, and then the little 2-inch circles. That's a great target. And I also like Scott Jedlinski's Modern Samurai Project target. Those are really the three. Those are the targets I use, and I really don't that and B8 repair centers, and that's it. I don't really mess with any other targets personally, though there are other good ones out there. But yeah, you want to spend a lot of time developing your draw. I want to be able to. That thing needs shot right now. And then if nothing changes about that scenario, within a second and a half, I want to be able to put a shot on, let's say a IDPA down 0 zone at 7 yards. I think that's a very, is that easy? No, it's not easy. It's hard. It's a pain in the butt. It'll take you a lot of time and effort to be able to do that. And so don't, be self-conscious if that's challenging. But being able to deploy your weapon, right? Like my reload, my recoil control, my trigger pressing, my sight picture, my transitions, my movement, like none of that matters until I have the gun in my hand aimed at the thing that may need shot, right? So you don't get any of those other technical skills into the equation until you're there, right? So for me, if you're going to pick one, pick the one that starts the party, right? Like that starts, like I'm now in a fight, right? And so I want to be in the fight early. Like, so if one guy starts the boxing match like this, fists up, ready to go, and the other guy starts the boxing match like, hey, are we starting? What's going on, man? And like hands down at his sides. Well, you've given one guy a pretty big advantage. And as, civilian defenders, Sherman House calls us, the civilian defenders, we're usually oftentimes behind the 8 ball, right? We're kind of like, they're initiating and we're reacting and we're having to do something. So I want to have choices. And the better my draw to hit a precise target, time is the more options I get. Like if someone is robbing me or whatever, and I think they might shoot me when this robbery is done, and they turn where I can see their ear, I know I probably have time to do something.
Yeah.
If you have a 3-second draw, you don't. You just don't. And when I say that, I'm actually in a weird way kind of holding it to a higher standard than a lot of the other performance shooting guys, because a lot of them would do that. Okay, service size pistol under a t-shirt, but I'm talking like, all right, you're wearing a sweater over your t-shirt and we're doing a 365 XL. Like that's the gun we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Because people need to keep in mind a lot of these like performance shooting goals. Like Alex Sansone the other day, he was talking to me about he saw somewhere that like, well, the standard is a 2-second bill drill from concealment. I'm like, the standard for a bill drill is 2 seconds from a USPSA holster for a USPSA GM. That's the standard. That's not the John Q. Citizen gun owner. If you can't do that, go home. That's really, really dumb, because almost no one can do that, right? There's a handful of people out there that can do that. And so, but what I want is with your actual carry gun, with the clothes you wore yesterday, right? Don't game it. Like, can you go out and shoot like a 8-inch circle at 7 yards in a second and a half? Now, if you can, that's fantastic. Let's get that down to a second. Because again, if we're looking at important technical skills, To me, that's a huge one. Now, does a sub-second matter? Like, not really. Personally, most of my draws are about 1.1 in that scenario. I'm usually not under a second. I can hit the gas, but I don't like it because I don't get the sight picture I want, right? And I'd rather own that sight picture and have it at 1.1 than just be always trying to do 0.9, 0.8, 0.7, whatever. But one of the reasons I think technical shooting is important, I've talked about all the reasons it's not, but one of the reasons it is that as a civilian, you're not getting a lot of flight time. You're not a cop. You're not a soldier. You're not arresting people all the time. You're not getting that stress inoculation. You're not getting that like comfort in chaos kind of thing. You're doing your normal job, right? And so for us, what can we do to stack the deck? Well, one, we can stress inoculate as best we can. We can do stuff like ECQC or Rogers, right? They can be a physically overwhelming thing where we're using hands-on violence, or that can be man, there's these targets are everywhere and they're not staying up very fast. What am I doing? Like, because most people when they go to Rogers, the first time they run the test, it's just overwhelming, right? Because it's very, very hard. And you want to get used to that kind of stuff to the best you can in a training environment. Is it one-to-one the same as actual experience? Of course not. But like, it's the best we can do, right? And so I want to stress inoculate as much as I can. I want to war game and come up with good plans and have technical skills, right? But once you've done what you can do, what more is there? Well, really, the one thing you can do more of is your physical fitness, your martial arts, and your technical shooting. That's it. There's no ceiling to those.
Yeah.
The grapplers today are better than the grapplers 50 years ago. The shooters today are better than the shooters 50 years ago. I mean, I know we're not supposed to say that, but it's true. If we weren't, then the people 50 years ago weren't doing a good job because their job was to make the next generation better, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, from a purely technical perspective, man, it's all improved. You know what I mean? As it should. We have better technology. We have better guns. We have better sights. We have optics. We have appendix carry. We have things that just make it better and easier. We should be doing more and better, right? Technical shooting, there is no ceiling. And if I'm trying to game things into me walking away from a fight, or my family walking away from a fight unharmed, or the general public walking away, depending on my scenario, yeah, better is good. And I find it enjoyable and fun. And I enjoy the pursuit, so I do it. If I didn't find it enjoyable, I probably wouldn't do it nearly as much. So, like if you're someone that like you did it for a while and, it was fine. Then you got the bug and you wanted to pursue that, like do it. Like, why not? Like there's no upper limit, right? But we don't want to get obsessed with it either. It's this balance. It's this, I think it's important, but there are other things that are more important, especially for newer people.
Well, I love where you've taken this. The simply the primacy of dry fire in general, being a safe gun handler and a person that makes the correct, safe, and legal decisions with that firearm, being a solid citizen that owns and carries a firearm. So that's the basically I see that's the first two things. And then the next thing is focusing on getting that first shot from concealment. And I like leaving it at those because the way I will present in my classes, I will often start almost immediately, go to the line with the timer. I go, here's what we need to do. Beep, pop, right? So that's the only thing you really need to do, be able to do. And then we'll work on the outliers. Mm-hmm. So I think that's just a little bit more simplistic way to say what you said. And to me, I think that's, you're saying it in a vivid way, and we need to get it across to people that, like you said, if you can't get that pistol out, everything else you can do it doesn't matter.
You can be able to put them all in one hole at 25 yards. That's a super cool skill. I can't do that. I'm not. But like that's awesome. But it doesn't matter till you can like get the gun out. You could be master class, GM class USPSA guy, run around, blaze it, but you've never actually drawn your LCP from the pocket holster you carry it in. Well, it doesn't matter, right? Like, what can you do with an actual carry gun under actual like clothing? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can do what Gabe White does. Dress like a cartoon character, have the same set of clothes every day, and that is a valid solution.
Yep.
Or you can learn, okay, I'm going to buy my clothes around. I know there's certain parameters that clothing has to meet. Alex Sansone would be a great guy to talk to about that. But how do we do all this from like real concealment with real carry guns? Like that's its own thing. And your ability to get that gun out and make a shot in a life or death scenario is really, all the other technical skills kind of pale in comparison. Now, those like soft tactical skills, making good decisions ahead of time and having good judgment, sober judgment in the moment, that's super important too. But from a technical perspective, draw the first shot is really, everything else is kind of secondary after that to me.
So then let's just spend a minute or so talking about clearing the cover garment.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one thing that I try and make sure I make clear to my students is know how the particular shirt, let's just say, so most of us guys like you, me, and the normal gun carry guy, we are able to wear a loose fitting shirt and carry a Glock 19 size pistol, right? That's kind of the norm. But whatever that pistol is that you carry, whatever clothing you wear for, let's just say, covered or concealed carry, there's that's another thing people understand.
Those are two different things.
So there's covered carry, there's concealed carry, and then there's undetectable. Mm-hmm. Most of the time, I'm pretty much covered carry. I'm covered carry on into a little bit of concealed. Mm-hmm. But I mean, just to be frank, because a lot of us guys, we can get away with that. But this shirt in particular, this shirt is not a good shirt for me to draw from under.
Oh, no, I was going to tell you that right now. That button-down shirt that's very popular,
yep.
It's actually one of the hardest types of shirts to draw from because of the shape of the bottom of the shirt, right? Because one, it's two pieces, not one. And then it's doing that like V shape, right? And so it's getting longer right where I need to clear it.
Yep.
And so that's actually a very complicated shirt to work with, relatively speaking, versus a T-shirt.
Oh, yeah. Well, when it's my choice, I am just running a loose fitting T-shirt with a well chosen holster and a good zero belt from Tenacor that amazingly will keep a medium sized pistol fairly well covered and not very well detectable from the normal person. But yeah, it's just so funny that this is literally one of my worst shirts to draw from. But I also still need to wear a shirt like this from time to time.
Yep.
So if I'm going to, I actually, when I leave the house wearing this shirt, I get at least a couple of at least clearing of the garment to my pistol. Just to get that feeling in my mind before I leave. But okay, so let's talk simplicity.
I want to talk about that. I think that's a really good idea. I think, and of course, you're doing this with a loaded gun, so this is not something we want to do a bunch of reps on. But doing like a one go through of, all right, with this shirt I'm wearing now, right? Like I am concealed carrying right now. This may shock you. But with my shirt I'm wearing right now, can I get at my carry gun, effectively? Yes. Okay, we're ready to go about our day. You know what I mean? Like, is this something you should work through in dry fire, like actual dry fire, and like, spend some time on it? Yeah, of course. But like,
get a mental rep in before you leave.
I'm very okay with like, all right, we're going somewhere. Let me go to the bathroom, face a safe direction, and I'm not doing any trigger pressing at all.
Yep.
But
Yep.
we're just gonna get out here and do that, and very carefully come back. Right.
Awesome. Awesome.
So sorry to interrupt, but I think that's, you need to be very, very careful how you're doing this. You can't be lackadaisical. You can't be, if you're having a bad day, if you're confused, you haven't had your coffee yet, whatever, don't do it. This is an advanced practitioner thing.
Yep.
But when dry fire, you spend a lot of time. Just go through your wardrobe, see how it works. Because most people don't. They use their USPSA gear or their like ideal carry gear, and then they go out and they wear the shirt you're wearing, and now all of a sudden that like 1 second draw you've worked real hard for is a 2 second draw, and you don't have that level of control you thought you did. And what you thought was a tactical decision that was a good decision is now not a good decision. And now your shooting became a gunfight. And that's not what we want. That's where
Yeah.
this like technical stuff interacts with the tactical stuff.
Yeah.
Like I forgot who said it, but it's really smart. Like technique is a tactic. Like skill is a tactic. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, so let's just go back to when we have our druthers and we've got our nice covered carry t-shirt on, and we've got our, whenever they come out, the new staccato C, or
Yeah.
yeah, a Glock 19 bore sight solutions like the one I have here. When you're clearing, are you a pinch the belly bunch, or are you a grab the bottom of the shirt kind of guy?
So, I am man, I'm a bad marketer right now. I am an instructor with Citizens Defense Research, headed by Melody Lauer. Got a lot of great people in the company now, and I am actually working on a technical shooting class that's going to be presented next year. Probably going to do 1 or 2 dry runs before we go live with it. But really, the meat and the potatoes of the class is what we're talking about right now. And
Awesome.
it's really about like, okay, how do we navigate cover garments, and how do we do that with a high level of technical skill and not just, like, yes, let's learn how to optimize our clothing for performance, but also, hey, sometimes you're going to have to wear stuff that's just not going to be great. Like, I spent a lot of my life in, wearing semi-formal, business casual or, semi-formal attire with a 365 XL and an Enigma. That's a thing that like that's just part of my life. And is my draw with that the same as my draw of Scott OP under a t-shirt, under an optimized like fitted t-shirt? No, that's going to be a little bit different, and you gotta know that. So there's going to be differences depending on what kind of shirt you're wearing. There's going to be differences depending on how many layers you're wearing. I've got a picture of me shooting a Steger class, and it was like unseasonably cold at Carl Wren's place that year, and I'm wearing like 3 jackets. Like every jacket I have in the truck, they're not meant to go together, but we're wearing all of them because it's freezing. And I'm shooting the whole class under those 3 layers. So against guys in USPSA gear, and I'm having to navigate. Well, how do you figure this out, right? Like, and really, there's not. Maybe some of the old masters know this stuff, but there's not a lot of like, just click here and learn it, right? Because it's very the possibilities are diverse, right? With body shape, with hand speed, with hand ability, like how strong are you, right? How dexterous are you? It's all very, let's see what works for your physiology, for your attributes, right? Now, generally speaking, I think it's really important to spend time with a lot of different start positions. Like I'm not above the cheater start position where hands on shirt, right? Like you're already grabbing
Scott
your.
Judlinski style.
Yeah, I think the first guy I saw do it was John Johnson, but Scott's famous for that. John and Scott are both good at it. Fig leaf, it's fine. If I'm in a grocery store or at the 7-Eleven or whatever, and there's a wall of chips between me and the scenario that's developing, might I do that? Absolutely. It'd be kind of silly not to. if someone's dead staring at me, would I do that? Probably not, so it's going to vary. So I don't want to be too married to a different start position. Like I shoot a lot of steel challenge, like outlaw steel challenge. Most of them will let me shoot for concealment, which you can't do in real steel challenge. But most of the guys, most of the match directors I shoot with, like, yeah, dude, just shoot like that. You're fine. And so from that's wrists above shoulders, right?
Mm-hmm.
And wrists above shoulders that's here. That's not here. That's up here. That's a challenging start position. I also like the Jack Benny, right, where we're kind of doing this scenario. I like the Jack Benny start position.
Huh.
I like hands behind your back. I think that's an important start position. I like what Tom Givens does, where you get an ammo box. Where he does it the shoot off every last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
A TacCon. You get the ammo box and beep, you let it go, and then you do your thing. I think you need to be very agnostic about where your hands start, because all that is so variable based on your situation. Have one you really like, ooh, I do best with this one. For me, that's the cheater position, the fig leaf. So I have that ready to go, because okay, I'm in a situation where it doesn't matter. I'm going to go to the good one, but I want to know that wherever my hands are, I can do my thing, right? So I think that's a really important element. The other thing too is versus getting specific techniques, because that is so variable. I don't want to say something here and someone tries it and it doesn't work for them, because that I don't think that'd be productive. But the things that are universal, the basics that do just, I think, work, are where I see most people unnecessarily slow their draws. Because I know there's a big controversy a while back about sub-second draws, doesn't matter, does it not? I mean, frankly, if your draw is longer than a second and a half, you're doing something weird, or you're severely compromised, right? Physically. You've got hand strength issues or muscle density issues. You're 70 years old. Something's wrong with you, right?
You said that's over a second and a half.
Over two. If we're talking about 2, 3 second, 4 second draws and stuff, you're either dealing with someone who has severe physical limitations, and we got to really work around that. Now we're in a very specialized training. How do I make this person as dangerous as they can be? Right.
Yeah.
And that's personalized. That's not something here's 10 easy tips to get, or we have technique errors that are just very easily fixed for the most part, right? And where you have some of the hardest to fix issues are people that have done a fair bit of shooting, right? Mm-hmm. Because they've really ingrained how to do it inefficiently, and that can be kind of hard to work with. So broad strokes are, if we're doing it just in a way that's efficient, we're going to be sub 2 seconds. There's really not much of a way to be over 2 seconds. If we're talking a Glock 19 under a t-shirt, if that's kind of the ideal state, the platonic ideal of what we're talking about, if you're taking more than 2 seconds, it's because you're doing something that's just odd, right? And so it's my job, okay, let's get rid of the odd stuff. That'll get you around high ones. And then we're going to all right, we're going to just get to efficiency. Really, there's kind of 2 draws that are popular these days. There's the scoop draw, which is a USPSA thing, but some of the tactical guys are doing it. I know Scott Jedlinski and Hunter Freeland have been doing some interesting stuff with it. That is essentially a draw where we draw our pistol and then scoop the gun up, right?
Yeah.
The reason people like that is it's fast, because what's the quickest way to get between 2 points? Straight line, right? So going from here to here. It's just a straight line is drawn to full extent. Then you have the Craig Douglas draw. He's the guy that I first saw enumerate it the way that I now do it, and this is one thing that I'm really big on. I really like doing it this way. Even in Steel Challenge, which is a sport that's literally only about drawing and transitions and accuracy, right? It's really only 3 elements going on in that sport. I still choose the Craig Douglas draw, because I personally don't want to learn 2 of them. And the fundamental idea of the Craig Douglas draw is, if you're shooting from the hip, it's position 1, position 2, position 3, the hands join, and then 4 become full extension. If you're shooting from appendix, we skip 2. We can go back to it if we need to, but we skip 2, go 1, 3, 4. We go 1, 3, 4. So it's kind of up and out versus the elevator, right? And both are valid, both work. Me personally, I don't trust myself enough to try to learn two draws. People cooler and smarter than I am do, and that's fine. It's your gunfight, not mine. And for me, I'd rather have one exactly how I want it. Now that said, I do think that we want to focus on our ability to get the gun out quickly and efficiently. We want to focus on our ability to do that from a variety of start positions. And then the last universal piece that I think is like something that does fit into a lecture rather than a discussion with an individual with their body, right? Is the other place I see people really lose time is you have to be very careful at specific parts of the draw. I have to be careful when my hand like establishes grip with the firearm. However you do that, whether it's like the Gabe White claw or full firing grip, or what I do is kind of something in between, or whatever you're doing, it doesn't matter. That's important because you mess that up, like you're going to have problems. You're going to have a weird wonky grip. Now all those hours of dry fire and practice, the stuff you've done, don't count because you're not shooting the way you always shoot. And you just made the whole problem much harder, right? So I got to be very careful when I'm grabbing the gun. I have to be very careful when my hands join at count 3, where, like my support hand is waiting, the gun hand comes up and they meet, right? So when these hands meet, I want to get that support hand on there correctly. I don't want, finger up on the trigger guard or teacupping it or something weird going on. I don't want to be touching controls with my left hand. I don't want any of that stuff happening. So I need to be careful when these hands come together. And then when I'm settling my sights, the last 10% of the press out, I mean that with my arms, not what I'm doing with my trigger.
Yeah.
But the last 10% as I go out, that's very important because that's giving me my sight picture. That's determining what kind of sight picture I'm playing with. And if I have, hey, dot land and then kind of float where I'm taking that shot, boom, I'm good. Like life's great. If I have, where is it? What's going on? That's not good. Or if I have streaks, that's not good either, right? So I'm looking for streak into a settle, and it's not going to be perfect. It's going to be kind of flitting around like that. But okay, hey, that's the sight picture I need. Boom, right? Those 3 points of the draw, count 1, count 3, and the very end of 4 are super important. We have to do them right.
Excellent.
Getting from 1 to 3 to the last 10% of 4, you need to go fast. You need to move at hand speed, right? Because what technical thing is happening from 1 to 3? Nothing at all. It's literally a hand speed game, right? As long as I'm being disciplined with my trigger finger, as long as I'm, and me personally, I'm a big believer, high on the slide until my hands are together and I've decided to shoot and I'm, bringing the weapon out to count 4. That's when I'll start touching the trigger, right? But okay, so I know that my finger's on the slide. I know I'm good. I'm here. My shirt's out of the way, right? I'm getting my gun. Well, okay, I have good grip. Well, what bonus point do I get for doing this versus, right? None. I gain nothing from being slow and deliberate there. Okay, I get my hands together, get a good count 3. All right, good. We're where we need to be. What do I get from doing this? Boom. Nothing, right? Versus boom. Like, if I can just get out there faster, that's better. Now, I don't want to just blindly shove it out as hard as I can because see what happens with my hands? Watch that. They stutter down. And what you're going to see is you're going to see maybe a streak or a flash, and then you're going to find the dot. That's not what I want. What I want is I'm moving really fast, but I'm landing it for people who've done striking like a jab. My hand is pretty loose. Like I'm not putting a lot of juice on my grip until that very last bit. It's like throwing a jab. It gets tight at extension, right? Now, I'm not saying I'm being super loose. This is an analogy. I know people tear me up, but I'm trying to be hand speed to the very end. And as I'm coming to that, like, all right, now I'm building my sight picture at the very last bit of that. Okay, I'm building my final grip there too, right? We're in an ECQC scenario. We're shooting from 2. We're shooting from 3. Whatever. Well, yeah, I will establish my grip differently. But assuming the standard 7-yard, 8-inch circle kind of problem, I want to be as fast as possible at all the points where hands aren't joining or I'm not sighting a gun, right? Getting the hand on the gun, getting my hands together, getting the gun sighted at the end of presentation. That all requires a lot of technical detail and like doing things right. Everything between there can be insane frenetic motion with no penalty. So do that. And if my trigger finger is, if I'm very disciplined about my trigger finger and where my hands are, that I'm not ever crossing a gun over my hand. I'm very disciplined about all that, and I have a quality appendix holster with a good wedge on it. And so it's now not pointed at my femoral because it's a properly designed appendix holster.
Mm-hmm.
If all that is happening, there is no penalty for speed. I'm not afraid of shooting myself because I've done the things to make that. I have a layered approach to make that, impossible unless a, lightning strike situation happens. And so now I am free because I think a lot of the reason people are slow at the draws are scared. They don't want to shoot themselves. And that's really smart. That's a healthy fear. You should have that fear. And so what we want to do is build our practice around I'm fast anywhere something technical isn't happening. I'm as fast as I can be. I'm moving at maximum hand speed for me, whatever that is. And then in those places that things have to happen just right, slower isn't the right word, but careful. There's like checklists of like what I'm feeling and what I'm seeing that have to happen for that to turn out the way I want it to turn out.
So the three, what I'm taking from what you said, the three quote technical points in this presentation are the grabbing or establishing grip of the gun, where the second hand or the support hand is mated and the grip is established, the full grip, and then the final technical aspect is where you're establishing that sight picture by slowing down or being just kind of increasing how careful you are at the end of that presentation.
Yep.
So you can press that trigger correctly and get an accurate shot off. So everything in between those 3 points of technical aspect, yeah.
I would be no slower if you put like if you electrocuted me. Like I'm moving as fast as my physiology will let me. And that's going to change. You're going to get older and you're going to slow down. Your hand speed's going to reduce. That's all reality. But like I don't want to be limited by anything other than the tactical situation in front of me and my decision making, and then my physiology. Like how fast can I move, right? So I'm not saying I need to use that time like, oh, I've got all this dead time. Let's just blast, pointlessly, thoughtlessly. I'm not saying that. It's all within the context of the tactical scenario in front of me, the decision-making scenario in front of me. But I don't want to have any pauses or gaps or lapses because I just chose to do things slowly when I didn't need to, right?
Yeah.
And so people are like, well, man, like you did that real fast. And I'm like, well, yeah, I didn't do anything but what needed to be done. And at all the places where like these little details don't matter, I am just moving as fast as I possibly can. Yeah. And that's usually good enough to do pretty good. And so that's my like big picture thing on drawing and how to get that draw to first shot. Now there are things, technical things when we're landing the sights. This is something that Steger talks about in his book a lot, and I think everyone should do this. This is something I'm an absolutist on. When we're talking about that draw to first shot hit, what we're talking about drawing to a spot. I see the spot I want to hit. We'll aim small, miss small thing, which, by the way, I'm doing a master's degree right now on Eastern classics. And I'll have you know that in the Mahabharata, the great work, greatest epic of ancient India, I prefer it to the Ramayana. So this is a work that in writing is 2,500 years old. In oral culture, it's probably 3,500 years old.
Wow.
They reference the concept of aim small, miss small in the Mahabharata. So
awesome.
Whatever cool cop you got talking about it, I'm here to tell you this is like a warrior culture thing. This is ancient, truly,
that's cool.
Truly ancient, right? And Arjun has to shoot a very small target, and he talks about the aim small, miss small thing. It's like the lesson, right? But anyway, when I'm getting to that like full extension, I have to pick a spot. I'm not shooting at an 8-inch circle. I'm picking a spot on the 8-inch circle. If I don't find anything visually distinct there, I as Bill Rogers said, I kind of project one with my mind. I imagine there's a spot there if I don't have one. And I'm trying to put my dot or my irons on that spot, and then I'm going to press, right? And the reason this works is very simple. It's because, if I'm aiming at a small thing and I'm a little bit off, I'm probably still on the bullseye somewhere. Whereas I'm aiming at the whole sheet of paper and I'm a little off, well, now I'm going to completely miss it, right?
Yeah.
But I want to be able to go to that extension, and I want it to, it's quick, but it's not chaotic. I'm going to show you the difference. It's the difference between this and that.
Yeah.
The second time it's still fast, but it's a hair slower at the end, but it lands instead of like this chaotic, like jerking motion. I'm trying to describe for the people listening.
Yeah, I like that concept of that description of it landing.
Yes.
Because you don't want to jump off of a roof and land hard. You want to
land bone straight and see what happens.
Or when you land with a parachute, you want that to be controlled. It's a controlled landing. That's cool. I like it.
Yeah, we're trying to land into a sight picture. And so people go, wow, you're so fast. I'm like, not really. I'm not doing anything faster than anyone else. I'm just not adding these inefficiencies, right?
Yeah.
I've just ruthlessly tried to remove inefficiencies and be just as careful as anyone else on the careful bits. But on the parts that don't really matter that much, I'm just going as fast as I physically can to pursue that goal of being limited only by the tactical situation and my physiology. I don't want my technique limiting my options.
Yeah.
Now, does this stuff usually matter? Probably not. If we're talking, grandma against the mugger in the 7-Eleven parking lot, this stuff is usually not that important. But if we're talking edge cases, if your fight isn't that, if your fight is dude with a plate carrier and a rifle in the shopping mall, and he's not the kind of guy that's going to give up after getting shot once, he's going to be the kind of guy like in the grocery store in Buffalo, he's going to fight. Well, is that likely? No. But is that reality? And could that be your reality? Absolutely. And so technical skills do matter sometimes. And whether you're in the parking lot or if you're in the shopping mall, the ability to get your hand on your gun, get your gun aimed at something, and then be able to make a precise shot and hit, a reasonably small target on demand with a real carry gun and real clothes. And people say that's basic, but I'm like, that's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Getting to where you can do that, you're not going to do it in a week, right? But getting to where you can do that, everything after that's kind of gravy. Everything after that's extra on top, right? Getting to where I can shoot that IDPA down 0, 8-inch circle from a real concealment with a real carry gun in a second and a half or less, like all day, every day. Like I'll bet my house that I can do it right now. Like getting to where you can do that on it. Everything after that is kind of extra,
Excellent.
But I do think that's something worth chasing. Are you going to get killed in the streets if you can't do it? No, probably not. Are you a bad person or not taking this seriously or you're doing it wrong? Like, no, man, I don't know. It's your life, right? I don't know what's going on. You got different things going on than I do. But is that, I think, a attainable goal for any, non-disabled, reasonably healthy person, right? Who's not at retiree age? Like, yeah, I think almost anyone can do that.
Yeah.
That doesn't have physical disability or, age or things like that. Dude, all of us can do a 1.5, why not? And then once you're at the 1.5, yeah, there's other skills we can work on, but let's start chasing that one because the problem doesn't change. The problem is still getting the gun into service when I'm at a deficit. Now, would I rather have the gun out sooner than faster? Absolutely. Like, yes, that's smarter and better. I'm not going to just rely on my skill. I would like to use my tactics and my recognition of the world around me to get ahead of these problems, avoid them if I can. 2, if I can't avoid them, I want to be, already have a gun in hand, right, when I make the decision to fire. But if I am in that scenario where, oh man, it's happening, it's right here. I did not get a war game this very much. I didn't get the 2-second warm up. This is happening. I want that to be as solid as it possibly can be. And because that is a scenario that happens. That happens. You can watch YouTube, you can watch live leak video all day of that happening.
Yeah.
And can we like Monday morning quarterback them and say like, well, they should have done? Well, yeah, of course you can. But like, is that a reality you might face? Sure. So, and it's one that you can prepare for. Like, I can't make you a Navy SEAL. I can't, make you a hardened, veteran law enforcement officer. There's no way you just have that life or you don't, right? If you don't, all I can do is train you. All I can do is teach you technical skills and mindset. And so, and mindset mindset might even be the right word. Mental preparation before the fact for the possibility of violence. I'm not even trying to teach you mindset. I like what Craig Douglas said. Maybe if you tread water for an hour, that might build some mindset. But short of that, I'm not sure it's transmissible.
Well, I like the way you put that. I think that is a pretty good mic drop for this technical conversation, man. I've had a lot of fun talking about this and getting your perspective and your articulation of what you do and a reasonable set of expectations for the non Kirk Clarks out there, including myself. But I would like to end this with one fun question. You drew your pistol there. And so the question is, what is your favorite carry rig as of late? I'm sure it changes, but what's your go-to these days? Pistol, holster, and optic.
All right, so I'm gonna be a nerd with you. Really, I carry like 3 or 4 guns more than anything. I carry when I'm wearing just like a normal stereotypical optimized like concealed carry setup, like a nice properly fitted T-shirt to where it looks good, but it still has room for all my stuff. Man, I've been carrying the Staccato CS a lot, which is their little like purpose-built 9mm magazine gun. And the only thing I don't like about it was, one, I hate the new grip texture on all the Staccatos, but that's an issue for another day. But 2, I don't like the 3.5-inch barrel. I really just wish they made it a 4-inch barrel. But it's a gun that makes competition guns originally selling to cops, which for the most part is 2 groups of people that don't do a lot of concealed carry shooting. So they're going to make new decisions in their marketing and their decision making, though I love their guns. I really want that Staccato C to come out with a 4-inch barrel, because to me
that's what I'm kind of dreaming about myself.
That with a 15-round mag. I don't like the 16-round mag either. It's too long. That with the 15-round mag, that's a gun approaching Glock 19 size, but with like measurable, I think, performance differences in several aspects. Mostly the fact that it's easier to shoot 25-yard groups with single action guns. It just is.
Yeah.
So if you have a precision shot, if that's your math problem, it's just easier to do with a single action gun. So I carry the CS a lot. I really like that. I'm mostly carrying that in an Enigma with a shell that was actually like made for me by Mirko Mugley. He makes holsters, several time TacCon champ, great guy. He just made one for me, and
awesome.
No one else made one back then. And so I use that for C2 size, and then or I'll use. I got the new Dark Star Apollo, and I've really been enjoying that. I also use JM Kydex stuff, and I use Keeper's concealment stuff. Those are kind of my staples: Filster, JM, Keepers, and Dark Star. Those are they handle almost all my needs. So if I'm getting to wear whatever I want, that's kind of the gun I'm carrying these days.
What's the optic?
Oh, that is a Holosun EPS carry. So that is just the littlest enclosed optic Holosun. I'm a big Holosun stan. I know that may make me a bad American or something, but I pay my taxes too, and that goes to a lot of questionable places.
Well, there's the Trigicons that everybody thinks are buying American. Yeah, it may have been assembled here, but every single electronic component in this whole world most likely came from China.
Overwhelming majority, yeah.
So, but yeah, here's my Boresight 19 and
the regular EPS or the EPS
yeah,
carry?
It's the regular EPS.
Yeah, that gun, yeah.
For carry, for concealed carry, I do not think there is a better couple of optics than the EPS and the EPS carry.
that they are solid optics in my experience. They're enclosed emitter, so if you gotta like if they get dirty or whatever, you have that nice. It's a nice to have for
Yep.
carrier. I think it's a need to have for duty, but for
Yeah.
carriers, I think it's nice to have because our guns are covered by shirts and stuff, so it's not as big of a deal. But
Yeah.
even then, it's a nice to have, and it's just a great optic. They work great. I've had fantastic experiences. The other reason I like Holosuns is they are pretty cheap. They're the cheapest like gun cheapest optic I personally carry. But I know there's been this like iron sights optic thing. Like they both break. They both suck. Like the coolest thing about optics is you get optics and iron sights. Like I got two things on this gun that help me shoot.
Yeah.
And so that's to me the biggest reason to have a dot is when you have both, right? Okay, they both suck. Well, I've got two, so likely to both of them going down at once is low. But all optics suck. They all break. I've seen lemons and broken everything or have heard of and seen others break everything. There is no like, oh, this is the one perfect one that solves all your problems. There's not. Some are built to better standards than others, but Holosun is built good enough and they're cheap. And so I have a pile of, EPSs, 407Cs, and 507 comps just lying around. And as stuff breaks and I send it off for warranty, I just pop a new one on and I just drive on my life. Because that's if you're actually shooting, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Like you need spare optics. Like you're gonna break them. Like I don't know what else to tell you. You're gonna break your gun too, right? If you shoot enough.
Yeah.
And so I really like the Holosuns. So that's kind of my go-to carry gun. I also carry small revolvers a fair bit. Usually when I'm like fanny pack carrying, or for whatever reason, if I have to off-body carry or something, I really, really prefer small revolvers for that. I'm pretty agnostic on which one. Like I like LCRs, I like J frames. Don't overthink it too much.
Yeah.
That's usually in a fanny pack by some company that's long out of business. Mark Llewell mentioned it in his like fanny pack opus, which if you're interested in fanny pack carry, like do that. I'm a fan. It makes sense in the jiu-jitsu and also like weightlifting gym and other places.
Yeah.
Then my in-between guns are I'll carry a SIG 365 XL a lot. That one just has a 507K on it. I'm perfectly satisfied with 507K. I don't see any reason to upgrade it to the EPS.
Yeah.
But if I had to start over again, I would just put an EPS on it, right?
Yeah.
EPS carry, rather.
Yeah.
The difference between the two, for those who don't know, is regular EPS is for like Glock 19 slide, like with guns, and the EPS carry is for like 365 XL, like little, like inch or less size guns. That's the only real difference between them is how wide they are.
Yeah.
And the mounting footprint. The EPS is RMR footprint, and the EPS carry is a 507K footprint, if I remember correct, or Shield RMS footprint, but whatever. So I like the 365 XL. Mine's got bore sight treatment on it. I actually have the one with the thumb safety for my hands. I like the one with the thumb safety, and I have it points like my 2011s and it has a thumb safety like my 2011s, and the trigger is not bad at all. So one, I have that since you can't put a gadget on a 365, it gives me a measure of extra security on reholstering. And it also it operates like my other guns. If in a panic or in a life or death scenario, I'm trying to find a safety, there's one there,
Yeah.
And is it the ideal safety? Is it as good as a proper 192011 safety? No, it is not. But it's good enough and it fits my hand. If it doesn't fit your hand, don't do it. So I like that one. And then my kind of like tweener gun, my like, I want something a little easier to shoot than the XL, but I want something a little easier to carry than the CS or a C2. I still carry a C2 sometimes. It's actually the gun I have now, which is an unusual firearm, but I'm fond of it. It is a Wilson Combat Sentinel XL. So that's their super, super tiniest grip they make with a 4-inch barrel in 38 Super.
Oh, wow.
With a Holosun 407C. So this is a very expensive gun with like a $250 optic on it. And I love everything about that because the optic's great. And the thing behind this gun is this is a gun that shoots very much like my 2011s. Same manual arms, same everything, but it's very concealable, unlike any 2011. And it runs the same. I shoot it great. It conceals excellently. The only things I don't like about it are how expensive it is, how expensive the ammo is, and how few rounds it holds, right? But those are all compromises I'm willing to make with certain dress circumstances.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like if I'm in the shopping mall, I'd rather have this than the XL personally. But because I shoot this better. Now, the only reason it's 38 Super is it's a small 1911, which are notoriously unreliable for a reason. And small 1911s, I want to put anything in my favor I can. The 1911 was originally designed around 45 ACP. 38 Super is the same length, so you get a lot more. The 1911 was designed around cartridges this length, right? And so the 38 Super, pound for pound, would usually be a little more reliable than a 9mm in the traditional like length magazine, right? Like front to back. So if I get more reliability for like marginally more recoil, because I find 38 Super, it has more blast, but it doesn't have any more recoil hardly that I can detect. So yeah, the ammo costs more, but I don't shoot this gun very much. It's a carry gun. I don't think you should be shooting your carry guns a ton, frankly. Make sure they work and leave them alone, But,
Yep. Awesome. Well, fun nerd time there. No matter what, we're all pretty serious about this stuff, but the toys are fun too.
Man, your credit card is an easy source of serotonin. You know what I mean? I'm not going to deny myself that.
Awesome. Well, buddy, I think that's a good note to call it a night. Just a blast hanging out and chatting with you, Kirk. And as serious as I can be, I would like to see when the Rogers shooting school has some spots open and try and make that happen. May not be able to do it this year, but it looks like you're kind of taking up this year. So give us an excuse to put it on into 2025.
Next year, man, that'd be great.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, you have a good night. Tell your wife thanks for letting you shoot the bull with some dude in Oklahoma over the internet. And you have a good evening, man.
Thank you, Aaron. And again, if you want more of me, check me out. I do training with Citizens Defense Research, headed by Melody Lauer. Look us up online. A lot of great resources, a lot of good articles me and the rest of the team have written. And look forward to training and seeing you and your audience in the future.
All right. Sounds good, man. Take it easy.
Later, Aaron.